Exercise 25 deals with the reproductive system. We're going to look at both the male and the female. We'll start with the male reproductive system. What's the function of it? Well, number one is to produce the sperm, which is the male gamete. Gametes are sex cells. So the sperm has 23 chromosomes in it. Is to transport that sperm, and then production of the male hormones, the androgen and testosterone. And so what we're going to look at in general is the production of the sperm that occurs in the testes, which, as you can see, is marked right here. And then once the sperm is produced, it's going to mature, and then it will travel up the ductus deferens, also known as the vas deferens. It comes up here. This structure right here is the urinary bladder. So it's actually this tube is going to travel up over the top and then come back down around. You have accessory structures that are adding additional substances, fluids to producing. You've got the sperm, now you're adding other fluids to produce the semen. It's now going to come down here and join. Notice the section right here from the urinary bladder now joins. Here, this is the urethra now. And so the sperm and urine are going to travel through the same ductwork, the same urethra down through the penis, and then eventually out. So the scrotum is the sac that contains the testes. It's right behind the penis. The testes prefer a little bit cooler temperature for production of the sperm, and so that's why it needs to be outside the body, so it's not within the pelvis cavity. It has to descend down, so it's a little bit cooler. You have two compartments of the scrotum. Each one contains a testis. Within the testes, you have several different tubes, if you will. First, the seminiferous tubules. Then you have what's known as the tubuli recti, the ready testis, and the afferent ductus. So the sperm, once it's produced, will travel through all of those. Then it will go into the epididymis, where it's going to mature, and it gains the flagella, so it gains motility. Then it will travel, as I mentioned, through the ductus deferens, previously known as the vas deferens. That is the tube that would be cut when a male has a vasectomy. There is an area called the ampulla. This is where the ductus deferens comes, and fluid from some of the accessory glands mix with that sperm, and then it's going to travel down through the ejaculatory duct and then through the urethra. And the urethra is divided into different areas, the membranous and spongy. So if we start first in the testes itself, so this is looking at just one of them, that you have initially these different lobes, and within each lobe you have the seminiferous tubules. This is where the sperm is going to be produced. Then it's going to travel through the straight tubule into the ready testis, along here into the ductwork, into the epididymis. The sperm is maturing now, it's gaining the tail, and then it's going to go here into the ductus deferens and finally leave the scrotum and through what's known as spermatic cord, travel up this, and now back into the pelvic cavity. You do have several accessory glands, the seminal vesicles. This contains mostly fructose, which is a sugar, which will help it survive. That fluid with the fructose in it is going to make up about 60% of the semen. The prostate gland, which is just below the urinary bladder, is going to surround the prostatic urethra. It adds a kind of a milky fluid. It's more alkaline, so a little bit higher pH. This acts actually kind of as a buffer to help the sperm be able to survive in the female, which is a more acidic environment. And then the Cowper's glands, also known as the bulbourethral glands, this provides a very thick and salty fluid that kind of helps to flush out and lubricate and clean out the urethra from the urine that may have previously been released through there. So all of these accessory glands provide extra fluids. And so where are they located? The seminal vesicle is right here. Here is the prostate gland right here. And then right here is your bubble urethra or Cowper's gland. Then the penis, that is the shaft that surrounds the urethra. It's used for both transporting not only the semen but also the urine. At birth, there is foreskin over it. That is what is removed if the male is circumcised. There's 3 different columns of tissue in there that form the erectile tissue. And then for females, a female reproductive system, similar to males, is production of the gametes, in this case, obviously, the egg, or what's known as the oocyte, sometimes referred to as the ovum. It's also producing the reproductive hormones, though they're a little different than males. You've got the estrogen, progesterone in there as well. It's also functioning in supporting the developing fetus if fertilization does occur. And one difference, obviously, between male and female, as we saw with the male just now, some of the male reproductive organs are outside of the body, but for females, they're all located primarily inside the pelvic cavity. Just FYI, that makes it a little bit harder sometimes in treating certain infections, certainly STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, because oftentimes on females, because these structures are internal, it's hard to see and know, and so the individual could be contagious but not realize it. So these drawings show with the female reproductive system from a lateral or a side view. You have got the uterus right up here, the cervix, the vagina. For reference point, right tucked underneath the uterus is the urinary bladder. So in terms of women, the openings from front to back, there's 3 openings for women. The body, the first one is the urethra opening that connects to the bladder, the vaginal opening, and then the third opening is the anus that opens into the rectum for the digestive system. From a front view, here is the uterus right here, the cervix, and then the vagina is down here. So here's the cervix. Now, you can see initially I marked where the uterus is. You have got this light-colored structure on either side. That is the ovary, and then you've got the uterine or fallopian tube. There are several ligaments that help to hold the uterus and fallopian tubes and everything in the proper positioning of it. With the female reproduction, there are some external genitals. Some people don't really realize that, but they are considered external, and that's the vulva area. The mons pubis is fat that's over that pubic bone. You have the labia majora, which are skin folds that are right behind the mons pubis. This is hair covered, and then the labia minora helps to protect both the urethra and vaginal openings, as shown in this picture here. And then continuing on, the vagina is actually a muscular canal. It's entrance to the uterus. It's also referred to as the birth canal. The pH in the vagina is more acidic. And so that's something that the sperm, why it has alkaline to act as a buffer and some of the semen to help counteract that acidity. The ovaries, they're about the size of an almond, so they're a lot smaller than what a lot of people think. They're located in the pelvic cavity. As I mentioned just a bit ago, they are held in place by several ligaments. These ligaments are the broad ligament, the suspensory ligament, and ovarian ligament. It's going to contain what we call the follicles, which contains the oocyte and supporting cells. The uterine tubes are fallopian tubes, also known as the oviducts. They are not directly attached to the ovary. So right next to it, but they're not physically touching them. And so when ovulation occurs, when that oocyte is released from the ovary, the ends of the uterine tubes have these little finger-like projections. They're called fimbriae, and they move, and that helps to pull and direct that oocyte into the fallopian tube. So the released egg or oocyte goes into the fallopian tube. If fertilization occurs, this is where it will occur, in that fallopian tube. Now, sometimes if a woman has infection along the fallopian tubes, it can lead to pelvic inflammatory disease, and there can be scarring. If woman has her tubes tied, then that is what they are doing. The tubes they're talking about are these fallopian tubes right here. So here's the ovary. The release of the oocyte goes into the fallopian tube. And if a woman has her tubes tied, she's still ovulating, but basically it gets blocked. But as long as the tubes are not tied, it will travel down. Fertilization occurs in the tubes, and then implantation, if it has been fertilized, then that fertilized egg now will be implanted in the wall of the uterus, and so then the pregnancy can proceed on. Notice what I was talking about right in this area. So here's the edge of the ovary, here's the edge of the fallopian tube. So very close, but not actually touching each other. The uterus is the muscular organ that is going to support the growing embryo and fetus during pregnancy, should pregnancy occur. It needs to be prepared prior to fertilization. It needs to be all set and ready to go. There's 3 different regions of the uterus. The top portion of it is known as the fundus. The main portion is the body of it, and then the cervix is where it connects to the vagina. Once again, you have several different ligaments that are helping to hold the uterus in the proper position and hold it in place and to support it. The layers of the uterus, there's 3 layers: the perimetrium, myometrium, and endometrium. The perimetrium is the superficial layer. The myometrium is smooth muscle, and then it's the middle layer, and then the innermost layer is the endometrium. This layer is the one that is going to respond to the hormones estrogen and progesterone. And so once a woman has reached puberty, this is the layer that is going to respond to the differing levels of the estrogen and progesterone with the monthly cycle to thicken in preparation in case fertilization occurs, and then implantation so that the pregnancy can survive and that uterus is prepared to be able to support that embryo. If pregnancy does not occur, then what will happen is this layer will be shed. And then that's on your monthly cycle, and then it starts all over again.